coming on this date because we got kicked out of here and couldn't be here on the 4th. So I'm here to present briefly, hopefully, a redevelopment plan called the New Redmond 2 Redevelopment Plan. This has nothing to do with it. I'm just reusing an exhibit from somebody else's project because these things are kind of expensive. The city, as sort of a background, previously had the New Redmond Redevelopment Plan on the site. Some of you may remember it. It was adopted circa 2008, 2010, had a couple of iterations, and was then repealed at the end of 2018 or the beginning of 2019. So I have these as exhibits because I couldn't, again, I apologize, I couldn't print these out in full size. This is, I have technically marked as A2 and this one is A1, but as a reference we'll start here with A2. This is a historical layout of the original area of the first redevelopment plan for this area. So as you can see, you have 4 sort of sub-areas within the plan. It's not colored in, but you can tell by the different shadings that we're operating within a different boundary, and it's a much larger boundary than the new plan footprints, the new plan's footprint is. Now, this was originally the vision of a gentleman by the name of Tom Moore, if I believe. I never met the guy, but it was based on historical conversations and context. Mr. Moore was going to do a massive redevelopment project of this site, I think including hotels and medical office space and residential. It's going to be like Disneyland over here. And it didn't materialize for a whole host of reasons. And in doing so, and his attempt to create the land assemblages to create that project, he ended up, through 2 subsidiaries, assembling this area in red here and this area in red here. This one is currently owned by one of those subsidiaries called Middlesex Future, LLC. This one was owned by, I believe it was called New Street Future, LLC. Did it turn off?
It's going in.
Okay, all right. And so these 2 assemblages exist now. They're owned by the same entities, and well, they're not actually owned by the same entity. This one's owned by one entity, this one's owned by another entity. Mr. Moore passed away. The business, I think, went into foreclosure, and these are no longer managed or overseen by Mr. Moore, his estate, or his subsidiaries. Right now, again, we're looking to narrow the scope of the plan from this to this. This redevelopment area here had a maximum, as a context, was at a maximum floor area ratio permitted of 15:1, which is kind of in line with our downtown general FAR zoning. And this area we're looking to operate at a potential 10:1. If you've read through some of the plan, you'll know that instead of hotels and residential and a whole bunch of things, the Disneyland that I was talking about, this plan is strictly for the prospective development of office, which is sort of a unique development choice in today's economy, to build modern office. Low-level Class B or lower office is not really renting. If the prospective owner of this site has the possibility of developing this as office, it's not impossible. We do see urban development of office. We have the Helix, right? Nokia is moving their offices here. You have the H1, H2. The hospitals are constantly expanding. There's Plum 2 that was built right next to the hospital. So it's not out of character, at least for us, to build new buildings for commercial office at scale, right? So obviously, you know, the types of folks who are renting like a law office or something on Livingston Avenue, this is a different animal, as each building or each prospective building that might get built here will probably have their own primary major tenant, some entity that would occupy. At this point, I have no idea who may or may not occupy prospective development here. That much I don't know, but the owner of this lot is looking to proceed forward with the redevelopment plan as such. So in further context, you may notice that in the redevelopment plan, we opted to do something called primary plan area and secondary plan area, which basically ties in periphery lots and their inclusion to being part of the major lot, the major assemblage. And basically the purpose of that is, and to be clear, there is no interest right now in including any of the lots in the periphery of this area for the plan. But they are on the periphery. It would grant them additional access to other roads, and should they choose to, try to negotiate a purchase of some of those sites, rather than have to come back here to amend the redevelopment plan to add one little sliver or a parcel here or there, we're including them, and they're sort of conditional on their inclusion in the plan if they are purchased and then looped in as part of the redevelopment of the broader area, because it could be sort of like a drive aisle, it could be anything. And so that's the purpose of the primary versus secondary plan areas. Now again, as I said, this is just strict office. The underlying zoning of this block here is C4, which is the downtown redevelopment area. At 10 FAR, this is dramatically lessened in terms of its potential development. The C4 zone goes up to 20 FAR, so literally half of the potential floor area that could be developed here on this lot. This area was envisioned to be a transitional block between the C4 and the rest of the city, transitioning into the residential areas. And for whatever reason, they chose to transition with the C3A district, which is sort of going back to something I mentioned before. It's the Livingston Avenue district, basically. It's for large old buildings that were converted into professional offices, lawyers, doctors, etc. And so while it's not a neat fit as a transitional area, this plan at 10 FAR operates as a much better transition, tapering off from the C4 into the 10 FAR, into the regular neighborhoods here. But it keeps the spirit of the C3A in that the C3A, the only real commercial uses you're allowed to do in the C3A are office-based. And the envisioning of this plan is, right now at least, strictly office-based, although we do account for the possibility of, an internal cafe or a little corner cafe as part of the ground floor of a prospective development. It's not uncommon, the hospitals all have cafes inside, and I think you can go to the Starbucks at Robert Johnson if you want to, and there's no reason to preclude something like that, because that's definitely something that they're going to want to have. As part of electrical vehicle deployment, which is a requirement to be considered for these redevelopment plans now, the envisioning here, the likely development pattern here is over the course of this plan, which hopefully is not going to take the 30 years that it's allowed to exist to be fully effectuated. Likely to be 1 or 2 office buildings on this site. And it's envisioned that several of those parking spaces would be met off-site, most likely, but not locked in, that they would be provided at the new street parking deck that's right down the street and has available space. They would have to arrange some kind of arrangement to pay for that between them and the parking authority. Not exactly my business how they arrange that, but that's how they'll have to set up, most likely to accommodate the parking for these buildings. And that's probably better because you have existing infrastructure throughout the city that can accommodate parking that's already been approved and built and has been envisioned with max capacity of the parking spaces within it. And so if they have less utilization than would be optimal and they can meet it, that has already been envisioned with the approvals that the parking decks got when they were built in the first place. And so as part of that, it's envisioned that they would have to do some EV upgrades to the public parking deck, which would then be available to the general public and whoever's parking there. It wouldn't be, locked in for the users of this site. It would be for the deck as a whole. cover that now. So, we're looking at minimum lot areas of 20,000 square feet, which would allow to split this up into two neat little development portions. Again, this is owned by somebody else, but it is potentially envisioned as a possible location where parking could be built or a smaller building could be built, but it's unlikely that that happened. Generally, graduated density, you assemble a bigger lot, and so you can build bigger. We're looking to go potentially up to 280 feet high here, which is less than the C4. With the FAR at 10, these wouldn't be massive, oppressive buildings. I mean, they'd be big, right? There's no denying that they'd be large buildings, but they wouldn't be, if you go to 280 feet and you go 10 FAR, you're not going to have a lot of floors. You'd have very large, awkward floor plates. It's not an impossible design choice, but it's an unlikely one if you're building regular office. So the buildings would be easily manageable in that way. And then proceeding forward, again, this was previously zoned C4 until 2006, 2007, when the city did a rezoning post the 2004 master plan, where this was recommended to be converted to a transitional area, and it was split between the R5A and the C3A zones, but the bulk of it is C3A. In terms of compliance with outside plans, you've probably heard these before from me. All of New Brunswick is a smart growth area, encourage development in urban centers with access to transit, reduce sprawl. The Middlesex County Destination 2040 plan, business innovation and expansion entrepreneurship, creating opportunities for office development, complete streets. There's a visioning in here that I skipped over that I'm sorry that I missed about the street lighting. That would be a requirement that the developer would pay for the upgraded street lighting throughout the corridor at their expense. Should they get a tax abatement as part of this project, they'd have to, for the duration of the tax abatement, pay for the cost of upgrading and maintaining the street lighting and the city's fees to PSE&G for those streets. Energy efficiency in terms of reducing vehicle miles traveled and just urban centered development near the train station. This is not zone C4, but the train station is pretty close to here. As the crow flies, this is about the same distance as the Heldrich. We're not talking significantly outside the periphery of the downtown. New Brunswick is a little small, so the downtown does consume a lot of the center there. So this is just about, I think, 4 or 5 blocks from the train station. Ultimately, it's certainly within walking distance. And also, New Street is a primary arterial here, and so access from 18 right onto New Street for people who work here is just sort of an ideal drop-off location, primarily if this is offsetting potential office development that might happen on the other side of the tracks, where the awkward road network might create additional congestion points, sort of like what we were talking about before the meeting started, and the awkward array of the French Street roads and the intersections. And this is one very awkward intersection right here at Bayard and New, and I think they call this Connector Way. And so to get commuters here to this existing parking space and then walking here would be very good for energy efficiency and climate change. Again, farmland preservation as you avoid developing sprawl office parks, although I imagine that there's probably not a ton of market for sprawl office parks. I think that most of the office that's getting built nowadays, if it's getting built at this kind of scale, is probably urban in centralized cities where there are a lot of professionals who are nearby or in the town who would work there. And transit-oriented development has a proximity to the train station. And this doesn't border any of the neighbor municipalities, and so their plans are not taken into account as part of this. That's kind of it. So it's an envisioning of reducing what was the redevelopment plan for here into smaller scale, smaller area, smaller density, into office, which, I'm a big fan and proponent of building housing in New Brunswick, but offices, as far as commercial uses go, is sort of light intensity, sure, it does bring some traffic in the morning, but it is, the people who work here, they're here during the day. The neighborhoods nearby and any residential development that might spring up all over here, which is probably going to at some point, is not going to be negatively impacted, as generally people are not home during working hours, and so the potential conflict of the existence of this building in terms of just feeling like somebody's watching from the office building is minimal at most, and we think it'd be a good potential for the this very large parcel that's currently undeveloped, sort of a big dirt hole in the ground. Well, it's not really a hole in the ground, a big dirt empty lot at this point. And it looks like there's development potential from the existing landowner, and we hope to see it develop shortly. And I'm sort of open to questions of that.
All right. Anyone on the board have any questions? Sure. Two questions.
Sure.
It sort of seems like this isn't particularly attractive for office development, kind of based on the fact that, folks are not reporting offices as much as they used to be. The demand is not there. I'm just wondering if there's any other options other than office for these, based on the zoning.
Well, I mean,
What else could
you could do mixed use residential, pretty much.
So that might be acceptable?
I don't see a reason to do so for a couple of reasons. One, at least on this side, that's already permitted by right. You can do a bigger apartment building over here than anything you could build over here. You could build twice as big. Both of whatever buildings you could build here combined, you could build here and just put residential in it, as of right now. That is a permitted use. And so there isn't necessarily, I think, a demand for that. There is a demand for it. I think that it's not necessary here. I think that the prospective option of doing office development, where clearly the developer has some network here where they've got in the pipeline something to develop these offices. And offices are good revenue generators. They're not nuisances. Again, you have the existing parking deck. You have an arterial road to drop it off. It's not. I'm trying to figure out how to word this. It's just sort of not that intense of a use, and people could come in and try to do residential here if they wanted to, by right. And so approaching this from the potential to create office, which we're somehow successfully doing it against all market trends, again with the Helix, with the Plum 2 development, and other just general hospital expansions that have happened over the last 5 or 6 years. We have the opportunity to tap into that market where we can do good ratables for the city, get good revenue while developing these lots in a different way, and sort of staying consistent with the underlying zoning, especially on this parcel over here, with the visioning of it being office in the first place.
Other question I had was, there's the Joyce Kilmer house in the, I don't know what you call it, the secondary area.
I didn't skip it just because of contiguousness. The city's not going to sell the Joyce Kilmer house.
No.
It would just look like a little awkward dent there. It's not in envisioning for anything. It's like a prospective thing. There's a couple of parking lots over here. Maybe they could have gotten the parking lot and turned it into, another access drive aisle. But again, none of these lots, in anything I've heard, are really being considered. It's just, you never know when something happens and there's some kind of opportunity and the developer's like, hey, I talked to whatever and I bought the property. And now we have to come back here to the planning board and go through this process to add this 25 by 100 parcel here on the corner for some reason. And so I feel incredibly confident at 90-95% clip that none of these parcels are likely to ever be included in any prospective development on this site. But for sort of safety's sake and avoiding grief down the road, they're being included. And they're also being tied in. You can't just build on them right now. You have to include them with with the larger parcel to make sure that it's not just sort of a potentially frivolous tie-in or whatnot, or somebody bought a bunch of these lots and then they're like, I want to build an office here. It's like, no, it's going to be part of this broader development. And yeah, the Joyce Comer house is not, it's not going to happen. That's just for the sake of having a clean map, honestly.
Any other questions from the board members? Seeing none, I'm going to open it up to the public. Anyone from the public have any questions, comments? Please come forward.
Good evening, Board. Charlie Cradaville, New Brunswick today. Do I need to be sworn in?
No, this is comment.
No.
Okay. So yeah, I'll just read a little bit from an article from 2008. It was in the Star Ledger. Quote, New Brunswick officials unveiled plans today for a $650 million development that eventually would include 760 residential units, office space, a 4-story hotel, and a supermarket at the southern end of New Street, adjacent to the train station. The project, which developers call, quote, the pinnacle at New Brunswick Station, would be built on 5.2 acres in phases based on changes in the real estate market. Construction is not expected to start for at least 2 years. The developer is still negotiating to obtain a part of the tract. Quote, this is another stage in our downtown redevelopment, a pedestrian-friendly use that takes advantage of our mass transit hub, Mayor James Cahill said. And so it sounds like 16 years later, this dream is dead, and the plan that is being put forth tonight is one that will not include housing, and one that will only bring people to the city during the workday. It seems like this piece of land, being so close to our train station, has a lot more potential. And while Mr. Dominguez pointed out accurately that some things in New Brunswick are going against the trends, and the Helix and Plum 2 are both examples of large office developments without a housing component. Those are being pushed by Robert Wood Johnson Hospital, Rutgers University. They're mega projects that, in one case, has significant support from the state government. This doesn't sound like that. This sounds like a private office project that is likely to not bring the intensity of development that belongs close to the train station. And I have to just remind everyone that we are in a housing crisis. I'm glad Mr. Dominguez is a proponent of more housing. May I ask, when was the last time the city opened a new unit of affordable housing?
If you want to count it, and I think we should, because I forget about this all the time, we subsidize the rehabilitation of 15 Bayard Street, so they, I remember that. I'm trying to think, I know that New Brunswick Tomorrow has developed a couple of, well, they're in the process of doing some rehabs right now. 53 units at Sterling Side are under construction and soon to be open-ish. I believe that, Hoffman's Pavilion, Hildebrand Commons, whatever it's called now, they're closing on their Aspire funding, I think at the middle of December. So be on the lookout for some action on our part in the next couple of council meetings, and I think they'll be breaking ground in Q1 next year, because I think that's already teed up. And I'm trying to think.
Some units in Jersey, yeah.
Right, but those aren't in progress as much as some of these others.
Right.
So I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Is there anything else that sticks out? Nothing else that sticks out of the top of my head.
And so basically in the last 4 years, I could count on both my hands the number of new affordable housing units in the city.
Unless you want to count the 53 that are almost done. Then you need more hands.
Many more.
Right, and I'm glad to see that project appears to be well on its way to conclusion. The Jersey Avenue one, on the other hand, does not seem like that, and some of the others, like Kaufman Pavilion, have been in the works for more than a decade and still haven't broken ground. So, while I'm pleased to see some ideas coming forward, it sounds like this was originally contemplated as being 760 residential units, walking distance from this train station. Mr. Dominguez is correct to point out that this is, it's frankly one of the only large areas that's within that close proximity to the train station that isn't already built up. The land's been cleared, and I'm perplexed as to why there's not a mixed-use proposal being put forward.
So there's a couple of pieces to that consideration. One is, given where the neighborhood and development patterns are right now, putting potentially a very massive building right here, a massive mixed-use building, might be less in line with sort of the transitional nature of where this is, because this sort of drops off right here, and you have a regular residential neighborhood. You have some schools, you have a couple of apartment buildings, but it's generally 1 and 2 family houses pretty much entering the corridor there. And so if you build another building at that density, that intensity, it's sort of a different animal than the intensity of an office building, which has sort of a predictable flow of traffic. You do need to create jobs for the city too, right? You can't just have housing, and again, very much in favor of housing, but you need to have jobs for folks who live here. And this is not precluding people who live here from working in these office buildings, right? Like it's a new office building that will presumably have hundreds of jobs in them, or 2 office buildings. And honestly, I have no idea what they're going to put in these potential buildings, but I do know that the owner of this lot is AST Development, or some subsidiary of them, which is the same developer as Plum 2. So I would not be surprised if there's a medical office or hospital-related development there too. So it literally not involved in any conversations like that, sort of a little bit of guesswork, but it's prospective potential for the site.
Got it.
And again, you know, if you're gonna build this and there's like this residential transitional area, having people here who are here during the day, who aren't here at night, who aren't looking down out their window into your window across the street, I think that there's a benefit to having this stepped off situation, especially again, when there's so much of downtown that's very flexibly zoned for, you know, a lot of development. You've got this prospective development with 800 units over here. You have the Borai building, you have the Elks project. You have a lot of redevelopment projects that have been approved in the last, 12, 18 months. And that redevelopment plan is, about 18 months old. There's a lot of land that has potential for further development that's even closer to downtown, that's even more walkable, that's not pressing up against existing neighborhoods. And so that's sort of where the thinking is there.
And another reason Mr. Dominguez cited was ratables, and so I want to get out in front of this and ask, is the applicant not going to request a pilot for these buildings? Is there a guarantee?
I have no idea.
Right, so we don't know, they might not be paying for the taxes.
Well, I'm not saying they're going to pay for the taxes, but that's a separate issue. But insofar as it applies, whatever gets built here will be paying, whether it's pilot or not, will be paying significantly more in revenue than an empty lot. And so that's very important. And again, offices are super low intensity in terms of resource consumption of tax revenue. And so there's another positive.
Understood. I just
Charlie, last question, and you're over. Tom.
Thanks. Yeah, I just want to make the point that if you don't approve a redevelopment plan, they're not eligible for a pilot. A pilot's not in the question. If you do, they are. Correct?
I mean, there's other factors at play. Is it a redevelopment area? Is it an urban enterprise zone? There's a lot of balancing act here, whether about eligibility. So, TBD.
Well, I'll just encourage the board to include a housing component or mixed-use component to this. I don't think it makes sense to only do offices here. It's too important a piece of land to have it only be used during the daytime only by office workers, especially given the market for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Going to close public portion. We go to a vote.
Yeah, Alyssa, if you could do the roll.
Yes. I need a motion on first, right?
I'll make a motion to
Recommend the adoption.
Okay, recommend the adoption of this redevelopment.
I'll second.
John Cox,
Yes.
Bob Cardiga,
Yes.
Mike Blackwell,
Yes.
Zach Wright,
Yes.
Diana Lopez. Yes. Chris Delatella,
Yes.
Carlina Melendez, Yulitza Checo. Yes.
Thank you. Other matters of interest to the public? Charlie, come forward.
Thank you. Charlie Cradville once again. I do want to thank Mr. Dominguez for letting me know about this special meeting. I probably wouldn't have known about it but for him telling me. That said, I think there's a reason I'm the only person here tonight. The city didn't promote this through their email blast. It's not on the city website. And, you know, I'm kind of, you know, at a loss for how the city can do a better job of doing this stuff, because I know there's a lot of important government meetings that go on, and, you know, this obviously had to be rescheduled. It was rescheduled timely. I saw the notice posted on the bulletin board downstairs. I'm sure that Mr. Dominguez also sent it to 2 newspapers as is required by law. But most people don't read the fine print of the newspaper. Most people don't go in here and look at the 48-hour notices on the board. We should be using our website. We should be using our email system. We should be promoting these meetings through all communications channels, including the city's significant social media accounts with their followings. And I think you probably would have had more people here if it had been promoted through those channels. And I am almost certain you would have had more people here if we offered remote access and people didn't have to, you know, make their way here to City Hall just to come to a meeting that's 35 minutes long. If folks could join via Zoom, we have the technology, it's existed, we've used it before, you've all used it before as part of this board, and I don't know how many times I'm going to have to ask before it finally happens, but I am going to bring it up again tonight. You should offer remote access to your meetings. You should talk to whoever needs to be talked to make that happen. This room should be outfitted with proper technology to be able to have not just a good remote access, but also for people to be able to have microphones, to be able to hear when there is a packed house, or when people are in the very back of the room. This room has really not changed very much over the decades, and I think that we would be all better served by having better technology here and using the technology that we already have to promote the work that this board does. I know you do some good things, and it would be nice to see that shared out proactively by the city instead of me constantly having to ask or check. But again, I truly thank you, Mr. Dominguez. You didn't have to send me that email, but you did, and so I got to be here tonight and got to make my comments, and I appreciate you hearing me out.
Thank you.
Just a question, is there a reason the agenda wasn't posted on the website, or was it? I looked for it a few days ago.
I thought it was on Friday.
I thought I posted it.
Yeah, I remember seeing it.
Oh, yeah.
I may be confusing it with the zoning board agenda, but I think I posted it.
And I think it was also mentioned at the last meeting that we were checking.
Yeah, we were looking, yeah.
I'll just, if I may, there's a community calendar on the website where the meetings are typically posted. This one's not on there. So that's what I meant by not on the website. The agenda might be there if you dig through, but the community calendar would be the logical place to also put it.
All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
A motion to adjourn.
Yes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.